man, medicine is a little bit different because military medicine has been around since there has been military, right? Like medicine has been around since there were humans, right? So the evolution of military medicine has been ridiculous, and just like in the way that we look at things, because science, when we go back to George Washington, right? Like go back to the American Revolution, we were still putting leeches on people to bleed them out of disease, right? We were cutting legs off because we didn't know how to deal with infection. We had no idea about germ theory. Or terrain theory, if you're trying to get conspiratorially minded. Anyway, look up terrain theory. It's pretty interesting. But we didn't know a lot of that stuff. And military medicine, look at, stuff like, Saving Private Ryan is obviously a fictional movie, but that, I don't know how many times I've seen in how many military training courses the medics would just basically try to stop some bleeding. They really didn't know how to use tourniquets. They would drop you some morphine if you were in pain, and then they just had to go on. Like the military medics in World War II were great at triage because they were just, they just knew how to like sort people and figure out who was going to live and who didn't. And, we started in GWOT. We really didn't have that many reps. Like medicine was catching up, but even the pack in 1993 that Tim Wilkinson was carrying and the Ranger medics in Black Hawk Down in Somalia, we would look at that today and we'd be like, what the heck is going on? Right. They went from sticks and rags and, gauze and packing wounds. Like tourniquets were, finally in vogue there, but they were still doing like, ligations and trying to take forceps and digging into people's thighs to try to stop femoral bleeds and stuff. Like they didn't have junctional tourniquets like we do now. We didn't even know how to we knew what the anatomy looked like. We didn't know how to stop those bleeds at the junction. We didn't know. And even now we're looking at stuff to how to fix the box, right? So the box is nose to navel, shoulders, like that is the box, right? Like if you get an injury inside of there, that is where medics are really, really trying to focus now on how do we fix it. And we're looking at all kinds of wacky stuff like gels and nanotechnology and trying to figure out how to stop, bleeds inside, getting our surgical teams far forward. That's something that we started doing in GWOT. That was a tactic, a technique, and a procedure that was a little bit different, right? Not only the technology and the skills that they were able to have, but when we started putting people within 1,000 meters of the actual line of troops, when you start putting a surgical team so close to like, hey, this operation might get kind of squirrely, so let's put the surgical teams close so that if we do take a casualty, we can get them to surgery right away. So the evolution, we can talk about all kinds of stuff, military blood administration.
I was going to say carrying blood.
That was a thing that we learned in GWOT where, Jason Cunningham famously, when he was, the Battle of Takur Ghar and, Jason, that's kind of how he made his bones. And Adam Getty, we had him on the podcast. He was a friend of Jason's. He went through the pipeline with him. One of Jason's instructors, I believe, actually. Jason was notorious in the career field in a good way. He was notorious for starting a blood program, for pushing the docs to be like, hey, we should be carrying blood. We should be carrying blood out there. And the whole military medical community, I'm not saying he started it for the whole military medical community. I'm saying that, the likelihood that a rescue force or that a medical force is carrying blood went through the roof. And now it's gold practice. Yeah. People understand that the number one fluid that you can give somebody is fresh whole blood. And that maybe you get it from medics are trained in buddy transfusion. It's went from, we didn't even carry blood before, to now every single PJ inside of their upgrade gets a blood class and knows how to do a buddy transfusion, literally taking your blood and giving it to a casualty on the spot.
Can I take a moment to throw some shade on some folks?
Go ahead. Send it.
How many people before that said no?
So, everybody.
To carrying blood.
Bro,
you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's that. We're talking about one thing.
Yep.
There are people out there. So if you're listening, I hope you are, and I hope you heed. But there are people out there, and that like we have told our listeners this is that, dude, we are the old folks now, right? There are people that are just waiting for us to finally get out of the way,
and deservedly so.
I hope not, but that's the reality of it. Somebody is finally like, dude, Peaches needs to finally he is holding us back.
Yep.
So you don't want to be that person, because if you start walking the dog on this, like, look how many lives could have been saved. Look how many lives have been saved, and you're out there saying no because it threatens your ego, or
Right.
or you think it's dangerous. How about nods? How about NVGs?
Yeah,
The longest time, we used to jump without NVGs.
Yep.
And you know, okay, sure, there were advances in NVGs, so it helps, right? But I mean, the first part of my career, we were not jumping with NVGs. We're jumping with a red chem light on the front and green chem lights on the helm in the back.
And everybody
would insane.
They would say the dumbest crap, like, "Oh, well, it's so dangerous, more dangerous than jumping and you can't see at night." That's what. And then the follow on, the frustrating thing is that they say, "No, it's too dangerous," and then that's where the conversation stops. They were like, "No, jumping with NVGs is too dangerous," and I'll keep it in the medical lane here. There are a bunch of surgical procedures that PJs before were never allowed to do. It is easier to crike somebody than it is to intubate somebody. Now, I know that there are times that you're not going to cut into somebody's throat as opposed to intubating somebody. But dude, you know how much of my training was focused on intubating casualties that were completely just near dead, right? And you would just be trying to get this intubation forever. Thank goodness we finally moved along. Like, hey, if this guy is unresponsive, give him some pain medication, crike him, get an airway for the love of God, or a blind airway of some sort that works where you can literally just shove a tube into their mouth to get an airway. How many patients did we lose because people were focused on intubation? Maybe it's only one, but that's still one too many. The fact that we never go another layer deep has been a frustration that's a great point to bring up. No, people are like, it's too dangerous. And then that's where the conversation stops. It's not like it's too dangerous. Okay, well, let's figure out a breakaway system for the NVGs. Let's figure out a way to rig the end, just like we have now. Now students are taught to jump with NVGs. Can you
imagine going back to jumping without NVGs right now?
No, absolutely not. The second that I got qualified jump at NVGs, I was like, what have I been doing? What have I been doing? Because I'll tell you what, it wasn't until I was in, I don't think that we weren't jumping NVGs at the 321st, were we?
Yeah.
Were we?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we were towards the end. Not at the beginning. But I think I left after you, though.
No, you're right. You're correct. I did get qualified to jump at the 321st because then when I got to Vegas, I had to do like a check ride.
Right.
Because it was different commands, right? So I got certified in AFSOC, and then when I got there, I remember my boy MX, shout out Tones, had to be like, hey, I need to take you through a 3-jump profile just to make sure you're okay. So, but I remember specifically when I got, like, the first time I was under canopy, I was like, what have we been doing? I can see my whole team.
Everything.
I can see everybody. It's so clear up against the night sky. Ugh. Anyway,
there's no half brakes landing. Where here we go.
Oh my God, the worst.
But
the worst.
So walking the dog on a little bit, how many things that are we, and say we, the collective we, being told no to now that
are going to end up
10 years
right, are going to become common practice,
are going to save lives.
Yeah.
You're talking about the, oh man, I'm going to throw shade again.
Here we go.
Love my maintainers, right? But they are, TO driven, technical order driven, right?
Yeah. Not innovation driven. Yeah, it's backwards.
It is black and white, and because these aircraft avionics systems and all that goes on with the aircraft, General Goodman said on the On Target podcast that there's 6,000 miracles that happen just to get an aircraft airborne, which is absolutely true because these things are so complicated.
Right. It's a flying supercomputer, especially when you talk about F-22, F-35, like the F-117 was complete. That was the first aircraft that was completely piloted by electronics, avionics. Like, and that thing was not supposed to fly. The 117 is just a modern miracle of aviation.
So the maintainers they're black and white. They're technical order driven, and right now, when we start talking about agile combat employment and landing planes and jets at random places or remote places where there's not a maintenance package there, which is what they're used to, they want to deploy with a whole bunch of pallets upon pallet positions of gear and lighting and stuff like that.
Nah, dog, you get a toolbox. You get you get a headlamp.
You get a toolbox, a headlamp, or a helmet with a headlamp, so that and you go to work.
Yep.
That, believe it or not, that is a struggle. Like where I'm at right now, that is a struggle trying to get people. but coming from the community that we come in, it's like, well, yeah, of course you're going to do that.
Yeah.
Like,
Of course.
You're going to travel light. That way you're not carrying a whole bunch of stuff. Because I still have it in my head, like, oh, I've got to carry this, so I'm going to go light.
Exactly. I gotta. Yeah. When I started talking about going to deploy this, I'm in my dumb PJ brain. I'm like, all right, so I got to pack all this medical stuff out, and then I'm going to need the saw, and then I'm going to need the jaws, I'm going to need these batteries, and I got my personal loadout, and then I got my weapon, and I got my secondary, and then I'm going to need a couple litters. I'm going to need the mass casualty hit. Like, I'm just going through.
You get it all together, and then you start cutting it. You're like, oh, nope, don't need that.
And then you wrap it up on a Skedco so you can drag it because it's too heavy to carry on your back. That's what we do.
So anyway, what I was getting at is it usually, like, that community right now is on the struggle bus in the way of, like, they are telling us no a lot, and maybe for some good reasons, maybe not, but we've got to find some middle ground to where don't just immediately go, nope,
right,
nope. How about yes, but, or a no, but,
right.
Like, we've got to get past that. So how many things are out there that we are doing right now that are costing lives or will cost lives, or that will go like, holy cow, how did we do this before, 10 years down the line? Yeah. So with that, when you start talking about junction tourniquets and stuff like that, how many lives would have been saved had an IFAC or tourniquets, multiple tourniquets that people carry? How many lives would that have saved?
Dude,
how many advancements? I remember talking to Mike Laurie about this, about how, not war, but GWOT and Afghanistan and Iraq, how ugly it is, but at the same time, the advances in medicine, and I'm talking about not just military medicine and trauma medicine. I'm talking about civilian medicine, civilian practices, or you guys don't call them TTPs, procedural.
They're called TMEPs.
Okay.
Tactical medical, something protocols. I'll look it up and see what that actually means. But they're essentially best practices.
Yeah. The medical protocols that they transition from military, because really when you're in that kind of trauma thing, we're just trying
tactical medical emergency protocols. There we go. Anyway.
So, if I'm out there dying on target, you do whatever you can to save me. Well, that starts like, hey, how did you think about that? I don't know, man. I just kind of problem solved this and it worked. Then you get some people that start, because we after actions report it, and talk about it, and they're like, okay, well, let's start training that and see how. Holy shit, we're starting to save a lot more people. All that, and it takes a couple of years because then the it's not the FDA, whatever the medical board then says, oh, okay, this is a viable practice. And then it goes into the civilian and stuff like that. So
it's the AMA, the American Medical Association.
There we go.
Yeah.
And then, so going even farther, how many advancements in prosthetics are there now?
Yeah.
I mean, we have active duty members that are amputees that are still able to
They're instructing.
Yeah.
They're running. They're passing physical fitness test. We had a Green Beret went back and deployed. There's a very famous picture of a Green Beret that lost his leg and then went back on the next deployment with a prosthetic.
And it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say an Air Force pilot was the first amputee that was able to return fully to service. I think that's a truth. I'll look it up here in a second. But, as I'm kind of, if you want to Google that, Google Air Force pilot prosthetic return to service or something. And then I want to say that he was the first one. But speaking on this stuff about how it's evolved, specifically to tourniquets, right? So before really GWOT, tourniquets weren't as ubiquitous as they are now, right? Like we were training for it and we were doing it. But when you talk about that transfer over to the civilian world, tourniquets in the field were like not a thing. Cops carrying tourniquets was never a thing. EMTs carrying tourniquets. There was all like this misinformation and bad science around, well, if you put a tourniquet on and it's on for more than 8 minutes, you're going to cause tissue death and that limb is going to die. And then slowly, like as you were like, it was crazy, deploying. And when you would come back home and you'd go do EMT rotations, you'd look around and you'd be like, guys, where are your tourniquets? What happens if somebody's bleeding out? They're like, well, you put pressure on it and then you got to call a doctor to make sure it's okay. Like all this other stuff. And then in ERs it was a crazy thing. And I remember this, I can't remember what year it was, but there was a tourniquet, but it was like on the wall, almost like in glass. Like you'd have an AED and I'd be like, oh, that's tight. You guys have tourniquets. You train? And they're like, no, only the doctor can put that on.
Oh
and
my
we're like,
gosh.
Are you joking? I've got knucklehead E3 Ranger qualified dudes that carry 2 tourniquets and they can put this thing on in 10 seconds. You're telling me you, registered nurse, don't know how to put a tourniquet on? Like, it was crazy. But now you see it all the time. You know, you see cops that get shot and immediately throw their tourniquet on, and people are, you know, civilian TCCC classes. So good on those folks that are running, you know, those kind of wilderness training sort of things and responder first aid stuff. But, you know, that's the evolution of civilian medicine, really driven by military best practices. And it's everywhere, from prosthetics to blood to, you know, a lot of these things that we were doing in the military. That's when we try to explain that pararescuemen are paramedics. However, we have a much larger scope of practice. You know, it reminded me when you were talking about people saying no. I've worked for flight docs that were like, well, yeah, I could teach you how to do this procedure, but without me over your shoulder, I really don't feel comfortable with you doing it in the field. And you're like, hold on, dude.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like,
either train me properly.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'm going to do it out in the field either way. Like, so,
right. Dude,
you know what I'm saying?
Well, pararescuemen team leaders, it's written into the rules that guide us, right? The rules and regulation. Pararescue team leaders are actually the on-scene medical control. So like, if you have to do something to save somebody's life, and this includes cutting someone's leg off to get them out of a trapped vehicle. Like, if I have to make the decision to do a field amputation, we are trained in that, and I get to make the call. I don't have to call home to dad to see if I'm allowed to do that. Like, I am dad. Like, if you're going to be
FaceTiming, like, is this going to be okay? Or
hey, we're getting shot at, and this guy's going to die if I leave him in this vehicle. But is it okay if I do something that I've trained on a cadaver 10,000 times? Get out of here. Anyway.
So to answer your amputee question, there's actually been quite a few. So as recently as an F-15 Eagle guy who had a cervical disc prosthetic, there was a captain back in 2016. She had a left hand missing, and so had a prosthetic. And then there's another one. There was another captain. She had a leg missing, and she's amputee and has a prosthetic. So,
nice.
So it's good because it's like I can't believe I have to say this, but these are extremely valuable people that have a lot of experience and a lot of bring value to the mission.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't we still have them operate? Now, I got it. Like, I remember, and I won't say what unit he's from, but he was an Army guy, and he did an elected amputation because just chronic knee pain. And they of course they wanted to put him on opiates during that time. And it was like, I'm not doing that. So it just years, and he did elected amputation. He had 3 different legs, one for your everyday, one for doing offsets, going on a half, going to an offset, and he had another one for jumping.
Get after it, dude.
Dude was still operating, and it was amazing.
I wonder why that guy got his pants tailored to hide his massive steel balls, dude. Like, that is badass, man. Like, why would you ever tell somebody like that they couldn't or no?
Well, somebody probably did.
Fuck those guys.
That somebody probably did, and that's why he's like, oh yeah, well, let me show you something.
Right. Oh yeah, watch this, homie.
Yeah.